So, the DCEU is finally changing. They're doing a full-on reboot. Kind of. I don't want to harp on it because frankly, I don't care, and I think the general audience doesn't get it complaint is fucking stupid and wrong and weirdly pessimistic. But yes, the new DCU does have some overlapping canon with stuff that is technically a part of the old DCU. The Suicide Squad is technically a sequel to the first Suicide Squad dumpster fire. But they don't really say that outright. They only hint at it with Harley and Rick Flag being friends. And yes, Peacemaker does have a cameo from the entire Justice League, but it's mostly Aquaman and the Flash, but that happens at the very end. You could easily cut it out because it doesn't change anything. Now, I would get it if Henry Cavill's Superman flew into the last battle and did something, but no, they just show up and pose and then leave. Blue Beetle isn't even directly connected to the old canon. Honestly, I would consider it the first actual DCU movie. We don't get any cameos, no exact references to any previous films, nothing like that at all. So, all of the complaints that people make when they talk about the general audience being dumb only exist to farm engagement and views from people who think they aren't a part of the general audience. But just so that we all know, by definition, we are all a part of the general audience. But this DC reboot does have me thinking. I'm technically a comic book YouTuber now, and I have somehow not talked about really any MCU movies. So, let's start big and do a video where I describe exactly how I would redo the MCU if I could go back in time and do it. Yes, we're gonna go through the entire history of the MCU and discuss what changes I would have done to not only fix the many mistakes that Marvel made with this universe, but I will also future-proof it to the best of my ability. This will be a multiple part series, so we're going to start with phase 1 and then go through them until we get to modern day. I don't think I'm going to keep the same number of phases in movies, but we'll start to see that as we get into later videos. I thought about doing it where they have all their IP from the start, but if I'm being honest, the stuff that people expect to change with that, for me at least, don't. I'll talk about it in like literally 30 seconds, but all I'm saying is that it wouldn't change anything for me and also provides an interesting challenge for the sake of the content. But I am a YouTuber of the people, so if you guys want me to do a video where I talk about how I would actually reboot the MCU from where it is right now, with all of the previous movies having existed and with all the IP being owned, please comment. But for now, let's get started with what would be the most controversial part of this video. Yeah, so when I was saying that the stuff people think of when they think of restarting the MCU with all of their IP, they're talking about this more than anything. Everybody says, we gotta start with Spider-Man and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and personally, I disagree. Even with all of their IP, I feel like focusing the first phase of the MCU on the Avengers is very important. They wouldn't do this, but I would. I think that they have all the characters they need for the first few phases from the start. Everything they're missing is more valuable later on in the universe when we're more accustomed to the rules and dynamics of everything. I also think that Iron Man is maybe the perfect introduction into this world. Tony is easily one of the most comparable characters to a real life person, and then that character is forced into this whimsical and fantastical world. The only thing that I would really change, like at all, is that I would include more references to the fact that this world already has crazy stuff going on. Hint at mutants and shit existing. In the ending, have an interview where instead of asking if Iron Man is his bodyguard or something, have them assume that Iron Man is obviously Tony Stark's bodyguard, and then ask if he's a mutant or something. Then you could have Tony Stark reveal that he is Iron Man. This can simultaneously be the introduction to us, the normal people, into this weird zany world. But in universe, it can be an inflection point where normal people started becoming superheroes without mutant abilities. This will help us later on when we buy Fox, by the way. See, this video isn't going to be me just saying to just remake the original phase 1 of the MCU. I think that obviously the Hulk movie is bad. I skipped this part in the script by accident, but the Hulk is in this universe and I think that he is important for the Avengers, but I do think that Captain America should be the second movie, is what I mean to say here. And I think that for the sake of Phase 1, we should have our main heroes focus on the different aspects of the more human world becoming magical again. I think that going into this with the knowledge that we will eventually buy Fox, and in the comics with mutants existing forever and with Fantastic Four being one of the first superhero teams, I think it makes sense for this world to be familiar with mutations. But a billionaire becoming a superhero, a guy accidentally turning into a monster, a literal god coming to Earth, and a war propaganda character ending up real and in the modern world, these are important ways to start bringing more absurdity into the world, which is going to help us with the X-Men later. I think Captain America is fine and works as a great second movie because it ups the stakes from simple man, billionaire, philanthropist, playboy, becomes superhero, to man gets genetically modified into being a superhero in the past, and then shows up in the future when we kind of forgot about him. I think everything about this movie should generally be the same. I'm not going to try and rewrite it. I love the beginning, but I do think it falls off a bit at the halfway mark and then ends really strongly. So maybe the only thing I would change is that we get more background hints at mutant hatred existing back then. I mean, Magneto is literally a Holocaust survivor, so clearly mutants have existed since before this movie would take place. Maybe have a throwaway line where Howard Stark talks about making the super soldier serum with modified X genes or something. I don't know. That's just the only real change I would want. Frankly, I don't know what to do with this movie specifically. I think we just need the Hulk in the Avengers, at least as a founding member, and then we can later work with him in the future. All that I would really want is for Nick Fury to offer Banner a job with S.H.I.E.L.D. with the promise of keeping him safe and secure so we can do good work without hurting anyone. Then Banner can turn him down and say that they can't possibly contain him. Outside of that, this movie just sucks. I'm sorry, I don't have anything else to say. We need to introduce Hulk. Maybe throw in like a Hulk villain or two for, Civil War eventually, just to help fill out the roster of characters in this universe. Iron Man 2 is fun as is personally, and I think it's important to put here to help us get him from not wanting to work with the government program to feeling like he actually wants to help S.H.I.E.L.D. now that he's not scared of dying. This is when the viewers and the rest of the world are finally introduced to the otherworldly threats. This has to happen right before Avengers because it needs to start building civilian distrust in aliens showing up on Earth and start really making things go in motion. And I think this movie should be mostly the same. Maybe it could take place in somewhere a little interesting, but this movie introduces us to Loki, who's going to be way more of a prominent villain throughout this series. He's not going to die or fake die or whatever happened in this movie, but he'll instead leave Asgard to go terrorize other planets throughout the galaxy, being chased by Thor, and will eventually run into Thanos when running from Thor once again. And you'll notice throughout this video, by the way, and I haven't said it yet, but I'm officially confirming it now, that the villains are important in this universe, and we're not just going to kill every bad guy every time. Sometimes they need to get away, and we need to off-screen have adventures where Thor and Loki are fighting and doing things, because then it builds more knowledge in Thor of who Loki is, and it starts to flesh out this universe and make it more lived in. I say this mostly because later on we're going to get to Civil War, and I really want it to be better than it was in the actual MCU. I think the Civil War comics are the most iconic comic books maybe ever, at least within the Marvel Universe. And I think that doing it right is important to me. This is where stuff gets real. I think this movie should begin the truly different MCU run. All of the movies in this phase have been relatively the same, and this movie won't be too different. The only difference is that Hank Pym is working for S.H.I.E.L.D. as an inventor who Tony and Bruce get along with pretty well. Janet is going to be established as being in New York running Pym Technologies, and then when the final battle happens, Hank is going to show up as Giant Man, and Janet's going to show up as the Wasp. They can joke that he used to call himself Ant-Man, which would explain why Janet's the Wasp and not Tiny Woman or something. I don't know, I'm sure fucking Joss Whedon would come up with like some fucking corny shit. Hank is shown to have some mental issues, but be, somewhat narcissistic, but have a heart of gold and want to help the Avengers save the day. I think the aftermath of the Avengers showing up will be more focused on in Phase 2, but we can get some extra credit scenes where we see news coverage talking about stuff that happened in New York, and talking about humans choosing to have superpowers and be superheroes. And then have someone chime in to say this is a part of the plan to make us think we want to be like those damn mutated freaks. Maybe have someone respond to him hinting that humans have become superheroes in the past and we kind of forgot about them. Basically, we want to hint at the Fantastic Four and X-Men and stuff because they're already established in this universe before the Avengers. And I think it's important to say, hey, they're here, we just didn't really care about them. Okay, that's where I'm at for Phase 1 of my perfect MCU. For this video, a lot of my only real complaints with actual Phase 1 is that I don't think they were super confident in the rest of their Marvel universe. And that's the only thing I really changed if you look back at it. I only went into it having faith that people can comprehend more complex worlds. Kind of like I said in the beginning of the video. With some optimism and trust in the general audience, you can take risks and not only make something great, but make something built to last the test of time. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you. Please subscribe, by the way, it really helps me a lot. And make sure to give me some more ideas for Phase 2 and so on, or tell me what you would change about the MCU if you went back in time. Alright, goodbye.